Earlier this week, I sat down with Governor Tim Walz to talk about the coming legislative session. Here is part one of our conversation. You campaigned with a One Minnesota slogan, pledging to listen to diverse views and bring people together. I've heard grumbling from people of a different political persuasion that you are not, as governor, being as inclusive with diverse views in cabinet appointments and advisory councils. How do you respond?
Well, I think you're probably always going to have that. People tend to think if they don't get their person on there that you're not listening. I think in terms of bringing folks together in what I think is arguably probably the most divided we've ever seen our nation, and what's, the backdrop of what's happening in DC, we came together with the only divided legislature, got a budget together, had tough issues that were lingering for years, like the provider tax, MNLARS, some of those types of things. Not only got that done, got it done without issuing a veto. And I view that as a veto as the ultimate decision where you couldn't come together. So as far as appointments and things like that, I think it's very clear if you're talking about diversity of inclusion, we have never seen more women in terms of cabinet, commissioners, and we've not seen people of color. My appointments to the judicial, to the bench, have been the most diverse ever, and I think a wide spectrum of folks from the biofuels conference. I mean, I think you're putting the corn growers and Farm Bureau along with Land Stewardship Project. That's a pretty big spectrum of folks across an industry. So I think in terms of where we're at right now, I think it's pretty arguable that that we have done probably as good a job as you could in this environment of bringing folks across party lines, across ideas, across differences together. And I think the usual complaints that, it's not my way, so it must be wrong.
Over the weekend, there was a shakeup with the Senate DFL leadership, and Susan Kent of Woodbury will be the new minority leader. Tom Bach will step down. What are your thoughts on this leadership change?
Well, the one thing is that the legislative branch is co-equal and independent. They make their decisions. I certainly want to congratulate Senator Kent and the caucus over there, and also to thank Senator Bach. We worked together. He was part of this negotiating team that did what we just spoke about bringing people together. And I think the Senate will make the choice that they think is best. I think you're always going to do shifts in power structures that move around, and my goal, though, and my responsibility is I have to work with the entire legislative branch. That means working with Majority Leader Gazelka, Minority Leader Kent, and then I've got it in the House with Speaker Hortman and Leader Doubt. And so it'll be a little different dynamic, but I certainly am ready to work with them, ready to make sure we do good for Minnesota.
We're in the midst of the longest economic expansion in history, and yet the markets are getting skittish with the coronavirus. Baby boomers are retiring en masse. The labor market is tightening. Every seat in the legislature will be on the ballot this fall, except for yours.
That's right.
What would you like to see the legislature accomplish this session?
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think one thing is Minnesotans tend to be thoughtful about the future. I think I tend to be pretty conservative in terms of rainy day funds. And it won't matter who's the president. It's not a debate about that. It's just markets have natural fluctuations, and I think there will be a correction at some point. That's why I think right now we're at a really unique moment. We have one of the strongest fiscal positions of any state in the nation. We have record reserves, and we'll be able to finish that up, knowing that when that downturn comes, then we don't have to cut snowplow drivers. We don't have to cut water treatment plant workers, whatever that may be. And so I think now we take advantage of having AAA bond rating. We are at a point, too, as you talk about this largest expansion, we are at historically low interest rates, just slightly over 1%. We have a backlog of needs that have been kicked down the road, from transportation to projects in communities. That's why my local jobs and project, the bonding bill, I did it differently. Over this last year, I was at over 600 public events, hundreds of communities, getting out there, listening to folks, vetting these online, getting input from them, and then putting out what I think is a bold proposal to use the opportunity now to prepare for the future, because it's going to get more expensive to fix these roads and bridges. It's going to get more expensive to invest in housing. We know that these are needs out there. Now's the time to do it. So I really have to be honest. I think we stay in our lane and take care of that. I think we take some of these things off the table, like emergency insulin and a few of those, and then we debate our philosophical differences. That's healthy going into an election. I think we should do something on red flag laws, on guns. That's going to be a very passionate debate, and that's okay. I'm not real hopeful that it'll pass the Senate, but it will at least set up a contrast so the voters will know come November. And that's not cynical. That's just the way the system's supposed to work. So I think what you'll see is us, again, coming together, finding a spot where we can do some serious investments at the cheapest interest rates we've ever seen, tackle a couple of bipartisan issues, perhaps. And I'm hopeful. I'm going to meet, later this week with GOP. I'm meeting with all their leadership about what their plans are, and I'm pretty hopeful that a clean energy plan was submitted. And this is the first time that I can remember them talking about the need to address carbon emissions. And so maybe there's some possibilities there.
It was one of the questions that I had for later. It appears energy will be a hot topic this session because the Senate Republicans are talking about their Clean Energy First proposal. The Senate and House DFL both have climate caucuses. You've established a climate change sub-cabinet and an advisory council. Is there a groundswell growing around this issue?
I do believe that, and I never want to. If you're coming to the party, I don't care if you're late. I'm hearing GOP senators talk about climate in a real, and not trying to deflect, saying we need to address it. I think their rhetoric is a little more of that we need to have a bridge to get there, but that's healthy. I'm okay with that. And as I meet with them, I'm going to encourage them that we're not in total agreement, but I think we should try and get what we can. So yes, I think the necessity of this, I have been saying this for a while, but I think we're just a few years away from that. It's pretty well established that we need to address climate change, we need to reduce carbon emissions, and we need to do it in a way that's not disruptive to our economy or to people's lives, meaning we have to have dependable, affordable, reliable energy, and we should move as quickly as we can to get there. I applaud Xcel Energy made a bold move, and they were with me on the 2050 plan. So I do think this is room to talk about, and I think folks in the legislatures know that this is on the public's mind. I met with a large business group, and they, no surprise, taxes tends to be on their mind, but that was I believe, third. Second was climate change, first, of course, with healthcare and drug pricing. So I think that's a healthy discussion, and I think there's maybe some room for common ground there.
The achievement gap remains problematic in Minnesota, and recently the Fed President Neel Kashkari and former Supreme Court Justice Alan Page proposed a constitutional amendment that would guarantee a quality education for every Minnesotan. Is this a good direction to move?
I've always viewed it as a fundamental right as a teacher. I welcome this conversation. These are things that we've strived for going clear back to Brown versus Board of Education. We have laws in place that should be doing this. I think bringing this up with an understanding that we need to do better. I dig into these numbers all the time. I know, for example, that our Native American dropout rate was 261 students. So when we're talking about percentage in this, the entire population is about 1,600 students. When we drop out 261 out of those, the graduation rate goes way down. We have to do better on that. So I think this conversation is a healthy one. I think it starts us at a good point. I'd also like to note, though, of our 1,400 students that didn't graduate that pulled down this gap, they were homeless or had home insecurity. Half of them still graduated, which speaks volumes about themselves, and their schools that they're in. But I think we need to approach this holistically. This is why we're going to have this conversation, and I welcome it. And if the decision is to go in that direction, that's fine. But just to be clear, just like Brown versus Board of Education was enshrined into law, it did not change the situation by itself. You had housing issues, you had equity of income issues. Those are things that I think this proposal kind of springboards to a broader conversation, and it will be my absolute responsibility to help us continue to close that. And we'll start to see graduation rates creep up. We see the gap closing slightly. That's small consolation to parents who are saying, what about my child right now? And I think for all of us, it's in all of our best interest, both morally and economically, because that workforce you talked about being so tight, we can't afford to lose any of these students. We need them in the workforce. We need them to be entrepreneurs. We need them to be teachers, doctors, construction. Those are all things that play into that. So this is a healthy conversation. I'm glad it's out there, and I think maybe it will be the catalyst for more.